So one of the things that was really interesting is the question about what did schools think when I changed? What did schools think? What did teachers think? And to be honest, I don't think anybody either asked me why I wasn't doing those tests. It just wasn't a thing. I didn't have to argue it. I just came in and did things differently. And I suspect people were happy that I was listening to them more. And I know you can listen when you're using psychometrics. It's not that you just do psychometrics. Of course you listen to people as well. But I think there was just such a change in how I was doing it. And very occasionally, and somebody will ask, Senko will ask me whether I do psychometrics, but it's usually because a parent is asking, because a health professional has asked. And there's a sense traditionally that that's what we do. So at the moment, I'm working with colleagues in education, and we're going to be meeting with the some of the medics next term to talk through why we do what we do, and then how we work together. So they understand what we do and what sort of information we can give, and what sort of information is available from other people, from schools and parents. That they don't have to have this unique idea from us, this unique piece of information.
Working with children, working with small children, I never had any difficulty in terms of either parents or schools in nurseries being perplexed as to why I wasn't using psychometrics. I was always keen to explain why, and I had the arguments to hand as to why I wouldn't do that. But also, I suppose there is something very respectful about trying to carry out assessments within the context that is familiar not only to the child, but also to the, to the parent and to the nursery setting or the school setting.
I think they're enjoying the collaborative aspect. I think it's respectful to be able to listen to and utilise the data that they've already gathered and involve them in the constructions around the child or young person. As I say, it's much more sort of systemically and contextually informed that way. So it feels like we're getting a greater picture or a deeper understanding of where the child's at and where they need to get to. So I think that the schools have seen my assessments as positive, at least I hope so, in the 21 years that I've been carrying them out. They certainly seem to have validity in the classroom because we're operating from a shared educational language. For example, some of the concepts that might be revealed by a psychometric cognitive measure of intelligence might be far less understood by school staff, and some EPs also might find them difficult to understand how they might apply to the classroom. So, for example, the concept of fluid reasoning might be less easy to transform into the classroom-based strategies. So I think it's really good that we can use a language that we can all operate from without that kind of hierarchy.
When I joined the service, I realised how well embedded it was, not just within the service, but also within the schools with which we work. So I think being able to join and fall into a service where that work, that kind of reframing and the building those relationships and new ways of working had happened, meant that I felt very well supported by school staff in the ways of working that would kind of complement the EPS values as well as our own needs and school concerns. So I think it felt like I joined at a point where that had already become so well embedded that it felt it didn't arise at all. I noticed the importance of the adults around the child having space to reflect themselves, having space to explore in ways that they might not in really hectic day-to-day lives. But I also noticed the impact that having that platform of being listened to, of being heard by others who have caring, supporting roles for the child, the impact that has on not just in a personal sense of being heard, of being listened to, but in terms of the group cohesion, that can be really helpful in sharing that space together. It can come with challenges, but it also can be really powerful as a mechanism for the adults to join, and those systems to come together around the child to think of best ways to move forward. And I think, yeah, in terms of it being valued by school and parents, I sense that in how I notice them contributing and being invited into the meeting, but also the sense of hope that is often tangible at the end of the meeting, thinking, oh, that's great, that kind of that sense of having those agreed collaborate, the action points that we've collaborated on having ways forward that feel supportive to everyone in the group. I feel very often that consultation enables us to end on a really hopeful solution focused note.
Found it hardest were ones where we're looking at dyslexia, and particularly around exam dispensation. And the exam dispensations often required a psychologist report, and the expectation was that it would be a measure of intelligence. So when we had the research evidence to talk about the fact that intelligence tests didn't make any difference in terms of the efficacy of the interventions that would be put in place for somebody who was having some literacy difficulties, that was an absolute boon. But what it did require me to do was to work with schools to help me to assess those youngsters for whom 25% extra time was needed. And rather than use proxy indicators, which is effectively what intelligence tests are, it was about going back to basics. So it was to say, well, how much reading is required in a typical exam? What's the child's speed of reading compared with the speed of reading of another youngster in their same class who the teacher would say is at the same sort of ability level in terms of their knowledge of history, for example, and get the teacher to do a speed of reading test around materials that they might typically read in an exam. So it's as close to the real activity as you would have, and that you would then do effectively a maths problem. If one child reads, if the child without difficulties reads at twice the speed of the child where they're looking for exam dispensations, then you need to give them twice as much time for the amount of time that it takes to read the paper. And similarly from the point of view of writing. So, and when I took schools through that process of how they justify the case for additional time or other measures, that made sense to the teachers. And of course, what I then said is, it's no good doing this on the day of the exam. You need to be able to demonstrate, your best evidence is that you've demonstrated that you've needed to do this throughout the 2 years of the course study. And the beauty of that is that then means that instead of this bringing in a psychologist to do an intelligence test, to write a report to justify 25% extra, that the nature of that work then led to the development of good practice for children with literacy difficulties throughout the school. And it then meant that there was a period when it was still required that an educational psychologist needed to sign it off. And I left the school with templates for providing evidence for that. And all I literally did is turned up and I looked at the evidence and put my name at the end of it and said, well, yeah, I've worked with this school. I can trust their practice. Here is the evidence. I've seen it. It all makes sense. Signature, Charles Savage, and it's proved. So schools like that, but they had to be taken on that journey. So again, it's that idea of collaborative consultation. It's not enough that we tell people stuff that they don't know, which was the old psychology of the intelligence test. I come in with my suitcase of tricks. I do it in a broom cupboard with a child. I then give them a score and I tell them what they don't know about the child, which is really insulting when that teacher has been working with that child every day, all day for the last 3 years. And I come in and after half an hour, I can tell them something they don't know. Nonsense. This approach is much more respectful. And it takes people with you. So yes, there were some times when schools have questioned it, and there are still times when schools do raise the question. I have to say now, when I provide them with the evidence that we have within the psychology service, our papers, say to them, this is our rationale for why we don't do it. It's rare that anybody comes back because they see the sense of it.